It's the best performing tank worldwide, 72 kilometers per hour speed and a shooting range of 500 kilometers. Yes, I'm talking about the Leopard 2 tanks. After a lot of back and forth, Germany has finally given its nod for Ukraine to have these tanks. It is being touted as a game changer by the West. But will it really change the game? Before I answer that, let me show you some visuals. Russia started its invasion from the Eastern Front, but within 2 months into the war, Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted the big cheese, the capital city of Kiev. But something unexpected happened. The Russian tanks were stuck on the streets. Columns of trucks and armored vehicles couldn't move on the paved roads. Without much choice, Russians had to abandon and retreat. So why am I telling you this today? Well, because winter is ending. The snow will soon start melting. And German tanks are soon going to start rolling in. Everyone is aware about this mud season, especially Russia. After all, this mud is what slowed down Hitler's invasion during the Second World War. They call it a time when roads stop existing. Mud can make Ukraine's terrain virtually impassable. President Volodymyr Zelensky has also thanked Germany and NATO members. An urgent supply of Leopard 2 can be expected soon. Even if the tanks reach Ukraine somehow and the soldiers are trained to use them, how is the country planning to operate these tanks on Ukrainian soil? Amid all this, Russia has already warned of an escalation, something that has been complementary with every Western package. But let me tell you why it's different this time. Russia's ambassador to Germany has said the move will take the conflict to a whole new level. So what can we expect next? Well, let's understand from the arsenal point of view. Since we're talking about tanks, Russia has been mostly using T-90. It's a third-generation Russian main battle tank. It has stood out to be an important weapon for Moscow. The country has used this in the 2014 Ukraine conflict, then in Syria, also in Azerbaijan. But there is a lot more in Russia's arsenal that is not currently in use. Moscow calls these super weapons, like RS-28 Sarmat. It's an intercontinental ballistic missile. Then there is Avangard missile system. Russia also has Poseidon. It's an unmanned underwater vehicle armed with nuclear weapons. Kinzhal is also part of Moscow's arsenal. It's an air-launched ballistic missile. These are all deadly weapons that could potentially bring Ukraine to a grinding halt. It all depends on Putin's game plan, though. He hasn't used these weapons so far. But will the Leopard 2 tank provoke the Russian president? We asked a military expert from Virginia in the United States.
I think right now Putin thinks, I think that he may think his forces are capable of defeating this armor, especially if they don't train up before they use it. And he would definitely prefer to keep it conventional. But we have to always understand that if this ever starts to succeed from the West and Russia actually starts to get driven back, then the chances of that go through the roof.
At the German parliament, Olaf Scholz was asked why sending tanks is no longer a provocation. And we have a similar question. What made the West change its stance?
There really is a war going on in Europe, not far away from here in Berlin. It's happening in a large country, Ukraine. That's why we always have to make very clear with everything we do that we do what is necessary and possible to support Ukraine, but that at the same time we avoid an escalation between Russia and NATO. We will continue to always stick to that principle.
Scholz avoided that question, but sending Leopard 2 tanks is being seen as overthrowing the principles of post-war German politics. So is this West's way to force Russia back to the negotiating table, or is the West going all out in this war? For more on this, we're now joined by Dmitry Babich from Moscow. He is a political analyst at the Voice of Russia. Thanks very much, Mr. Babich, for speaking to WION. Now, Kiev is understandably happy with this decision. It's welcomed Germany's move. The Western allies seem to be elated as well. How do you think the Leopard 2 tanks could change the course of the Russia-Ukraine war? Are these the game changer that they're being touted to be?
No, certainly these tanks are not a game changer because let me single out two important moments. First, these tanks will arrive in 3 or 4 months. That was said by the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius. Second, the numbers which are cited, 14 tanks, also a comparable number of American tanks, Abrams. This is nothing compared to the amount of tanks that Russia destroyed on the territory of Ukraine. According to some estimates, Russia destroyed 7,000 tanks. Okay, maybe it was less, but it was certainly several thousand. So these numbers, 14 tanks or 20 tanks or 30, this is peanuts in the context of this war. And let me remind you that it was Russia who gave these weapons to Ukraine when Ukraine was a democratic state, allied to Russia in the framework of Community of Independent States. And it was basically Russia's generosity that Ukraine had so much weapons of Soviet making. As for the Western weapons, they are not of much use in the Ukrainian and Russian conditions because these are sophisticated, very expensive weapons. What is important, however, is that this war has shown how wars of the 21st century are going to look like. They're going to look like terrible, terrible conflicts. They're not going to be like, the Gulf War in 1991. And this is very important for Russia because we are not fighting Ukraine, we are fighting NATO. We're afraid of a NATO attack against Russia. That's why we had to take this preemptive action against the very rabidly anti-Russian government in Kiev. And after these 12 months, the West will realize that it is not ready for a real war with Russia. The West is not prepared to have a war with a front line that stretches to 2,000 miles. The West is not prepared to have a war with mobilized armies, not with just a few expeditionary corps, professional corps. So basically, this war, in the end, it serves Russia's interest because it deters the West from further expansion. What we were afraid of when we started this military action, it was not, Ukraine. We were not afraid of Ukraine. We were afraid of the West that might use Ukraine as a launching pad for an attack against Russia. And the aim of deterring the Western attack has been achieved. The West will not be ready for such a war for at least 20 or 30 years.
Okay, but Russia has said that this decision by Germany is a dangerous one. At the same time, Moscow claims heavy Western tanks will be destroyed on the battlefield. Is this bravado on part of Moscow? And could these weapons take the war to the next level?
What do you expect from diplomats and from politicians? Do you expect them to say, "Oh, we're so afraid to be defeated"? Of course, they are saying as much as they can in order to be polite, but at the same time to look self-assured. This is a very unfriendly move on the side of Germany. For the first time since the World War II, there are German tanks with German insignia, these terrible crosses, on the territory which we consider to be Russian. This is terrible. This will not be forgotten. Germany will not be Russia's economic partner in the near future. That's for sure. We will not forgive them. On the other hand, we're not going to be afraid. We're not going to yell, "Oh, we will use terrible weapons, nuclear weapons." This is a dangerous move on the side of Germany, of course, and on the side of the United States. The Americans are behaving in the most irresponsible way because they are far away, they are behind the ocean. And they use their so-called allies, in fact, their proxies, in order to kind of do the dirty job for them. You know, the Ukrainians are dying for them. The Europeans are sending weapons and risking their security. For whom? For Americans. This is not a very fair game on the side of the United States. But as for the United States, we haven't got any illusions about them for a long time. This is not the United States that we used to love in the 60s, in the 70s, you know, my generation. This is an aggressive, imperialist, nasty state that attacks other countries and at the same time talks about democracy.
Okay, and interestingly, of course, the United States levels the exact same allegations against Russia. But we leave it at that. Dmitry Babich, thank you for speaking to WION.
Thank you.